Hello, you made it. It's the last day of STAAR tutorials. We're going to start off with a little overview of what you can do at this point to make it so hopefully this is the last STAAR English test you will ever have to take. Here we go. To ace this STAAR, make sure you make this test your priority. Take it seriously. Think about it in advance. Use all those resources we've given you on the Canvas page. Use the handouts for these sessions. Log on to texasassessment.gov and do a practice test. Doing all of that will make it so hopefully this is the last test ever for you. That day, arrive awake and ready. Get a good night's sleep the night before because this is a serious deal. This could affect you graduating on time. You want to show up well rested and well fed. Hunger can be very distracting during a test. If you're just thinking about getting to the point where you can eat food, you're not focused on the fact that this test could be something that continues to plague you throughout your high school career. Also, don't choose poorly when it comes to your food. You don't want to be sitting in there with an upset stomach, calling out its little whale song and distracting everybody. Look over your handouts again as last-minute reminders that morning. And when you get into that test, take your time. 5 hours is a lot of time. Use it all wisely. Rushing through the test is the fastest way to end up having to take it again, and that means you have to do another 30 hours of 45 tutorials. Don't let that happen to future you. Save future you from any kind of torture like this. If you're taking the test and you start getting really tired of reading those and just want to have the experience be done, remind yourself that you could be sitting through a whole nother test and all those tutorials in the future. Put forth the time while you're taking the test. And here's a very important one. Read all the passages. Pre-write your essay. Reread your essay. Use that time. Don't just try and get through the test and say that you're done. Make sure that you've done the best work possible. While you're taking the STAAR, remember that you can change up the order of the test. Really, the first sections that you see should actually be like the last sections that you take. You can change up the order however you want. The Cambium program that we're going to use makes changing the order a little more difficult, but you'll remember, as I showed you the other day, you can advance through to other sections. You just have to make sure you go back and answer the questions that you skipped. Make sure you consider the choice of order like a priority for you, where when you first look at that test, you think, which section do I want to do first? The reading comprehension section, that's half the grade, but it requires you to analyze some passages pretty intensely. That takes a lot of focus. If you leave it to be the last thing, you might be running out of steam by the time you get there, so you should definitely do that section earlier. The essay is the third section of the test, and it's about a quarter of the grade, but it requires on you being able to analyze a prompt and writing with purpose and organization. That requires a lot of thought and effort. You want to make sure you do it when you feel the sharpest. The first section is the revising section. It's only 13% of your score, but you do have to read through some passages and make a lot of changes to it, and it does require some analysis. Still, it's not one of the sections you should do first. You don't have to be 100% sharp on that. Usually I like to do that one second to last. And the editing section is the second section of the test, but it can be the last one. This is the one section where you don't actually have to read the entire passage. You could just look at the grammar questions and see where you need to make changes. So this is the part where if you're looking for a break from really intense reading, that's the editing section, and it's a good one to do last. Remember to make the order that works best for you. What a lot of people do is they start off with the essay, then they go on to the revising section where they're thinking about flow, and they go back and reread the essay and making sure that it flows just like they worked on with the revising section. Then they can take on the reading comprehension section, and then the editing section, and then they reread the essay one last time, checking for grammar mistakes. That's one possible suggestion, but maybe your teacher wants to pause right now and give their suggestion for exactly what they like to do as far as STAAR order goes. Or maybe not. Remember, there are 8 different passages to read on the exam. The passages that require the least intensive reading are on the editing section. Having the reading comprehension passages, you can change up the order as you are taking it, but understand that basically 6 of those 8 passages, you need to read every single word very carefully. And of course, make sure that every question gets answered before you submit your test. The other thing to consider is you should look everything up. You have a dictionary both in paper and digital form. On Cambium, there's a dictionary where you can just plug the word in and get the definition. You're also going to have a paper dictionary right there. I want you to think about the fact that STAAR lets you use this dictionary, but kind of counts on the fact that you will not use the dictionary. There are 3 definition questions. Of course, you'll use the dictionary on that, but there's also going to be about 5 to 7 misspelled words in the editing section, and you can check on that in the dictionary and save yourself from missing a word that maybe would have slipped by you. You can also look up synonyms for words in your essay if you want to sound smarter. Having more complicated vocabulary is always something that's going to impress people, but it takes a little bit of time to make sure that you choose the right word. That's the kind of effort that can really help drive up that essay score and help you to pass. If you're trying to find a word, but you can't find it in the dictionary, maybe it's misspelled, or maybe you need to change its verb tense, or maybe you need to change it from a plural to singular. By doing this, you can find like the base word of it, so you can find it in the dictionary. Now, about different sections of the test. In the essay sections, English 1 essays are expository, where you're going to explain some idea about life, and English 2 essays are persuasive essays, where you're going to take a side on some idea about life. Not a huge difference between the 2 of these. One will tell you what to explain, while the other lets you decide what to explain, but make sure that you take a stand and stick with it the whole time. When you see the prompt, you're going to have this little box right here. This is called the read section, and then it will tell you to think about something. And these are great sections, but they're not necessary and often distracting. The part that you need to write is what's right down here at the bottom, where it says write an essay, explaining why new technology is so important to teenagers. In this example, remember to turn that into a question and figure out exactly how you want to answer that. Now, this is what a paper copy looks like of an essay that scored a 1. You don't want to have an essay that looks like this. You need to break it up into paragraphs. Take the time to plan it out. So you have an introduction where you make an answer to the question. You're going to have that thesis statement right there at the end of the first paragraph. And then as you go into the next paragraphs, they'll kind of back up your thesis statement with reasons, evidence, and explanations. The third paragraph will give you another reason with more evidence and more explanations, and then you can have that fourth paragraph that wraps it up. Now, if you would like to go deeper into essay section reminders, this PowerPoint is available on the Canvas page. But the big idea is, of course, to make sure you have a clear thesis statement that answers the prompt, has a big idea, not like specific details right there, and then it's clear and concise. Now, here are more bits of information for the actual paragraphs in there. Like I said, this is available on the PowerPoints on the Canvas page, but you can go take a look at that closer if you would like to look at some more essay suggestions. All right. A strong thesis and organization will get you to a passing score, but making it interesting to read and confidence will get you to the top scores. Topics chosen are usually ideas that can relate to all people, so use that introduction to talk about how it affects all people to connect with the essay reader. Then try to avoid saying, I think, or in my opinion. That sounds like you could be wrong. You don't want to be wrong. Be confident. All right, the reading comprehension section is 50% of the test and 34 questions long. You have to read all of those passages. Now, most of the time, you're going to be trying to figure out what the author's purpose or what the theme was of the passage. A lot of times that comes through specifically on how the passage ends, so you can't skim it or skip it. You have to figure out what the whole thing's really trying to say. The types of questions that you're going to be asked on here, there will be 3 that ask about definitions, making sure that you understand how a word is used or which definition best matches up how it's used. You're also going to have 5 questions that compare and contrast 2 different essays or 2 different passages. Those will be the first passages that you read. Make sure that you find the answer that works for both passages. You'll have 4 questions that talk about the author's purpose or theme, and you have to make sure that you're considering the whole passage. They'll have lots of examples that just talk about what's going on in one paragraph, but think about the entire passage as a whole. You also have 15 questions about making inferences and using text evidence. So make sure anytime it brings up a specific line from an essay or from the passage, that you read that entire paragraph again, just so you completely understand the context in which it was being used. The key to this section is using the 3 most valuable tools. The dictionary, so anytime you see a word you don't recognize, you look it up. The time that you have, read the passages, reread it, reread the paragraphs. Use the time now so you don't have to come back and do this again. And also the order of the test. Try and figure out when you're going to be sharpest. If you show up and you're barely awake, maybe that's not the time to read the reading comprehension section. But if you're ready to do well on the test, start off, get that reading comprehension test under your belt when your mind is sharp. The revising section is the first section on the test. It has 2 passages, and you have to read them both entirely. It's always set up like some student has written an essay and you're giving them some suggestions on what you can do to make it better. As you're first reading it, look out for sentences that seem confusing or out of place. Give them a little mark, or just kind of make a note on your notepad on the Cambium system, because odds are you're going to have a question about that section later. Remember that every paragraph has a purpose and has a big idea. You want to make sure you're thinking about what each paragraph is trying to say to make things easier for you later when you're answering the questions. And watch the flow of ideas. Each paragraph sentences flow into each other. Later on, when you're having to add paragraphs or sentences to the paragraphs, you want to make sure that it actually fits into that flow. The editing section is the second on the test. It has 2 passages, but you don't have to read them as carefully. It's 9 questions worth 13% of the score. This will test you on your grammar, and we all know grammar can be an issue, but it's usually not as difficult as you think. If they have no changes necessary as an option, let me let you know that it's rarely ever that. I think in the past 4 years that has popped up maybe once as an actual answer. So usually those are there to trick you. Make sure you read through the questions carefully and try to think about how the sentence would read with any changes. Like I said before, there are going to be a lot of misspelled words. Use the dictionary to check spelling. If I find out that you didn't pass the STAAR test because you didn't use your dictionary, I might use that dictionary to beat you. That's not true. Don't forget that comma placement is another big question that pops up. You have that handout today to remind you about how commas will be used. There will also be about 5 questions about fixing verb tenses. More information about that on the handouts. And there are other errors, of course, but those are the big ones. Just to remind you, when you're looking at one of these questions, a good way to consider how the answer choices would work is to actually make the change. Think about what that change would do. So, for instance, this one, underneath us meandering through the same turquoise pool with schools of tropical fish. What I did here was I thought about what those changes would look like if I made them. So I rewrote out the sentence with all of those changes to help me get to the right answer. Now, are you always going to have the time to be able to do that? Not in most parts of your life, but STAAR gives you 5 hours to take this. You got the time. And here's another example where, once again, just making the changes, thinking about how that would affect the entire sentence makes it so you get a little bit faster towards finding your right answer. This one right here was just a straight up spelling issue. And you want to make sure that you're looking out for that, because that's going to happen a lot. Remember this above all else, you've been given materials by your teachers that can help you prepare. You have the Canvas, you have the Cambium page, you have the handouts. You can choose to look at all of this or not. You have 5 hours to take the test in any order you want. You can use all of that time and all of that freedom wisely or not. You do have a dictionary to define any word on the test. You can open the dictionary or not. It's ultimately up to you. If you take the test seriously, you're hopefully going to be done with it after next week. Repeating the test makes it a little bit worse each time. How much of your life do you want to spend dedicated to passing the STAAR test? Why don't we just get it all out of the way in the next week? All right, thank you guys, and tip your waitress.